When it comes to Capcom fighting games, none are more iconic than that of the Street Fighter series. This year, this has been proven once again with Street Fighter 6 receiving huge sales numbers and critical acclaim. While it seems Capcom put all their fighting game eggs in one basket these days, there is a period in where the Japanese company would make loads of different ones. To some degree, people tend to remember the praise the Darkstalkers games got, give rival schools its fair share of love, and hugely celebrate both the SNK and Marvel crossover games. Appreciation for all of these titles can regularly be seen online, but others tend to get a lot less love than certain others. So join me today as we mix things up somewhat to discuss the history of one of Capcom's lesser celebrated franchises. With all of that said, hello ladies and gentlemen, Big Daddy Top Hat here. This is Cyberbots. Yeah. Let's begin today's tale by briefly touching on some games that most people have played. Marvel vs. Capcom and Marvel vs. Capcom 2. Within these titles that allow an eclectic mix of fighters to do battle, you will likely have recalled seeing or playing as this guy. Representing the Capcom side of things, Jin Saotome, like many of the characters in the games, is the star of his very own franchise, Cyberbots, the very subject of this video. So let's discuss this game's place in history and why less gamers have gotten around to playing this one. Cyberbots would first surface in 1995, a year that would see the release of many Capcom fighting games. That very same year would see the arrival of Street Fighter Alpha, Marvel Super Heroes, Night Warriors Darkstalkers Revenge, and Street Fighter the movie The Game. That's a lot of different titles considering Capcom just spaced 7 years between Street Fighter 5 and 6. So no wonder not everyone got around to playing this one, considering all these fighters came from just one publisher. And that's without even taking into account fighting games from different companies, and the crazy amount of Capcom titles that were released in the years both before and after. This was very much the period of fighting game oversaturation. To add to this franchise's relative obscurity, only the arcade version of the game would be released worldwide, with its console counterparts for the Sega Saturn and Sony PlayStation both being left exclusively in Japan. While Cyberbots arcades existed in the West and elsewhere, it is said that they were distributed in extremely limited numbers, further limiting the chances that you experience this game in its prime. If I was to speculate why this was the case, I would make the sensible guess that this was due to the fact that the game is themed around piloting mechs in combat. A direction for a fighting game that was more in line with what was popular within Japanese animes, rather than what was popular in the West. Then again, Transformers managed to get popular around most of the world, as did the giant fighting robots in Power Rangers. But still, our passion for robotics in video games and other media seems to pale in comparison to that of the Japanese. Known as Cyberbots, Fullmetal madness in the West, this Capcom fighting game with a difference is said to be a spin-off of an earlier Capcom game known as Armored Warriors. Released just 1 year earlier, Armored Warriors is thematically similar, but instead handles as a beat-em-up. Subscribe now and leave a comment if you would like to see me cover this one in the future. Over the years, as one likely expects, the Japanese have received an insane amount of mech-themed games. Cyberbots, like many of these, features some similarities, in that after you pick a character, you can bespokely pick a mech with different legs, arms and weapons. The legs you choose will determine your mech's movement abilities, the arms impact a mech's reach and melee capabilities, and the weapons allow players to shoot projectiles, etc. Before you even get that far along though, first you must choose a pilot for your mech, which begs the question, what is the point of this, when your mech's capabilities are built around which parts you use to construct it? Well, the game's characters exist for narrative purposes, with each of them having their own storylines which unfold upon picking each. All of these characters exist in a world near the end of this century, an era in time whereby, according to the game, Earth has become extremely overpopulated. Due to this issue, many Earthlings have moved to space colonies, with those left on the planet conducting experiments that will help determine Earth's future. We will get to discussing the characters from this game in a moment, but first let's discuss this one's gameplay. While aesthetically extremely different looking to say Street Fighter or Darkstalkers, at its heart Cyberbots has a lot of similarities with its fellow Capcom fighting game contemporaries. therefore meaning if you know how to play any of those other games, then you will likely have a strong idea about how to play this one too. However, the arcade game did feature a 4-button layout as opposed to the usual for the time 6. Units came with a button each for both a light and heavy attack. As for the latter two, one would be labelled boost, which allows for dash in, and a weapon button for, well, weapons. As one would expect, Cyberbots features a wide range of attacks. By combining different button inputs and joystick motions, players can unleash powerful and flashy attacks unique to each mech. In certain fashion, special moves often involve quarter circle or charge motions combined with special button inputs. ArcadeQuartermasters.com notes some advanced battle techniques that can be taken advantage of in this game. Throws, for example, can be utilised in combat. Each mech has a unique throwing technique based on their fighting style. Some characters can even throw opponents while they're airborne. You can also get close to your opponents and grapple and weaken their primary arm. This inflicts gradual damage and rapidly depletes the opponent's arm gauge, increasing the chance of successfully dislodging their main arm. Without their main arm, the opponent's offensive capabilities decrease, awarding an instant strategic advantage. Further from this, and rather interestingly, you can retrieve a broken main arm by walking over it. If you are thrown, rapidly pressing the boost button can result in a safe fall. This allows your character to quickly recover after landing on the ground and reduces the damage they receive by half. Incoming attacks from opponents can also be blocked, which like in Street Fighter is performed by pressing the directional button away from your opponent. Blocking minimises damage from physical blows, but blocked special attacks still cause a small amount of damage. As mentioned earlier, dashes are possible through the use of a boost button, but these consume your mech's boost gauge. Push in the direction twice while in midair, and using the boost button to dash allows your mech to fly or hover. This manoeuvre allows you to fly for short durations and move horizontally while airborne. Temporary flight also consumes the boost gauge. Pressing the weapon button can activate your mech's unique shoulder gun. The ammunition is infinite, but the weapon gauge overheats after a few shots and requires refilling to be used again. Some mechs possess special moves associated with their secondary weapons. The game also has something known as sure killing techniques. These refer to the individual mech's moves to learn and master. The most lethal techniques available to your mech has its own unique set of devastating maneuvers waiting to be utilised. When a power gauge is full, a special hidden technique known as a cyber combo can also be pulled off. These combine multiple moves into one powerful attack or amplify a mech's signature move. As for the characters, the game stars the pilot we have already mentioned earlier, Jin Saotome. Jin competes in the game's robotic combat to honour the memory of his father. Joining Jin in the game, we have Santana Lawrence, an individual who is said to be a self-centered loner and professional scavenger and mercenary. Adding to these two, the title features Mary Miyabi, a female captain of Earth Force looking to find an escaped prisoner, but in the game's plot turns against her team due to learning of their shady doings. Gawain Murdoch, who is playable in the game, is a retired Earth Force captain. This man has lived in seclusion since the death of his men on a training mission. He returns though after learning about Earth Force corruption. Arieta escaped from Earth Force after seeing her friends die in their lab. Apparently Earth Force were kidnapping children, then using them in questionable experiments. Her only concern is permanently escaping the torture she was put through. Finally, from the playable lineup, we have Bao and Mao, siblings captured by Earth Force. They escape and use a mech for self-defense. With no training, they get by on luck alone. Like many fighting games, the title features its fair share of non-playable characters too, including bosses. The console versions of the game also include a few extra characters the players do. But whatever version you play, my favourite character is Emperor Death Satan, the king of Hell Dorado and the Milky Way Express. What is most fun about this character is that in addition to owning the Warlock mech, they also own a freaking Akuma mech, a super powerful one based on everyone's favourite Street Fighter murderer. The arcade version of this title was relatively popular in Japan, but would be criticised by Next Generation magazine due to them concluding that the title lacks charm, craze and the gameplay that Capcom is known for. It would take 2 years before home ports of Cyberbots hit shelves. In the year 2000, GameSpot would publish an import review of this game. They would conclude that visually Cyberbots is a masterpiece. If Capcom has perfected anything through its many endeavours, it is the sharp look of their games. Cyberbots takes full advantage of the Saturn's superior sprite handling skills. delivers a sharp display, and has a great animation. It also sports interactive backgrounds where building and other structures can be pummeled as each fight progresses. By comparison, though, the soundtrack is merely good, not spectacular. If you loved Darkstalkers, Marvel superheroes and the rest of Capcom's fighting games, Cyberbots is a must-have for your library. Although it is not a big name fighter, it's a welcome variation sure to please any die-hard fan picking it up on import. Interestingly, while home versions of the game were completely missed out on in the West back in the 90s, years later, in the futuristic month of September 2011, Cyberbots finally made it home via the PlayStation Network, to minimal fanfare. However, more recently on June 24th, 2022, the game would reach a wider audience than ever when it was included as part of Capcom Fighting Collection released for the Nintendo Switch, PS4, Windows and Xbox. No matter which version of Cyberbots you happen to play, you will experience a title that showcases detailed and vibrant sprite artwork, typical of the era's 2D fighting games. The stages are well designed, featuring dynamic backgrounds and interactive elements that add visual flair to the battles. The soundtrack is energetic and fitting, complementing the intense robot battles. It offers solid gameplay mechanics, a deep character roster, and customization options that add a lot of replay value. Given the West's relative disinterest in most things mech related, and this game's limited presence over the years, it's not that surprising really that so many people passed this one up. However, next time you play Marvel vs Capcom, if you've played Cyberbots or not, you will at least have a better idea of who this guy is now. Speaking of Jin, while Cyberbots would never get a direct sequel, he would feature in another mech-based fighter that was developed and published by Capcom. I am talking about Techromancer, that was released in the arcade and for the Sega Dreamcast, so let me know if you fancy a video on that one soon. If you enjoyed learning about this obscure Capcom fighting game, then you'll probably like my video on Red Earth, so click the annotation now to see that one. Cheerio!